Okay, even though you may are just receiving this ground or will be receiving this ground, I want to make a few succession comments about what you're going to do with this ground. Quite honestly, this qualifies me to come here and teach today, because my title is Farm and Ranch Succession Transition. So he'll make some comments for succession. First comment is simply this. Understand that if you're working with a farmer, they never plan to retire. They don't have that plan. That's not in their wheelhouse. For us boomers, we don't retire on time, or we don't ever want to retire because basically we don't know what else we do. And it's true for me too. How do I know about that? It's happening to me too. I've talked about my wife. I'm old enough to retire. My wife says, well, what are you going to do? I hate that question. What she doesn't understand is, after 2 weeks of boredom, I'll go figure out something. You know what I'm trying to say? If I sit around for 2 weeks, I'm going to be done. That's it. I'll figure out what to do. Don't leave me alone. I'll figure it out. But here, 18% of Iowa farmers, the most recent information I have, says they never retire, and another 52% say they only plan to semi-retire. That's 70% of Iowa farmers never fully plan to get out of farming. You're not going to retire if you're farming. And by the way, boomers don't. So why is this a big deal? Because less than 50% have a good succession plan, or one that's even have one at all. In other words, is it in date or not in date? Less than 50% have one. If you talk to, and I'm getting that as anecdotal information from bankers, lawyers, other people who work with professionals that work with farmers. They said less than 50% have a good succession plan, or even have one at all. So that's why it's important. They have a hard time giving up control. For us baby boomers, it's all a function of control. And let's be honest. If my mother-in-law held the farm ground and I was farming it, and she passed away on June 2nd, when did I finally get control of that farm ground? On June 3rd. So that'd be what, 2 months? Well, it's almost 3 now. It's almost 3 months. And here I am, 67 years old, and that's 3. I've only had control of that for 3 months. Am I going to give that up right away? No. Even though my son's 42, to be honest with you, I wouldn't give that up. Are you with me? Does that make sense? That's why we kind of got a sandwich generation going here, because our parents lasted longer. I mean, that's good. Love to have them around here. It was awesome. Wishing my mother-in-law was still around, but because I loved her, she was a great gal. But the point is, it's a function of control, and they have no other plans for retirement. I talked to one farmer once. He said, as long as I can get in the cab, I'm going to keep going. He'd go on to say, I don't know what I do. I never took up woodworking. I never took up fishing. I never took up hunting. I never had time. I don't do any of those other hobbies or crafts because I never had time. I don't like to go to the bar. I'm not going to sit in the bar all day. I'm not going to go somewhere and play cards. I don't drink coffee, so I'm not going to Casey's in the morning or McDonald's or wherever you want to go. All right? They're not going to do those things. As long as I get in the cab, I might as well just keep farming, because this is what I know and this is what I was always going to do. So I'm going to keep going. So here's the funny part of that story. He goes, and he says, I finally succumbed and paid money to get football tickets to go to Nebraska football, because now they finally become available, and it's so irrelevant, I don't even shut the combine off to go to the game. I just give my tickets to somebody else. Who cares? And who cares? We just invent new ways to screw it up. Okay. And don't miss this fact. Most farmers feel like newer equipment with GPS and all that stuff makes it easier to go. Clearly, with the hydraulic or air ride seats or whatever we have in those cabs now, it's way easier than they're bouncing along on a 40/20 or a 560, which like I did when I grew up. Okay. So producers may not be planning to retire, but the fact of the matter is simply this: we still haven't figured out how to avoid the pine box. We're all going to die. So what happens to our stuff when we're gone? That's why we need a good succession plan. Are you with me? Yeah. But most farmers don't have a good succession plan. Because more often than not, planning tends to be deferred until some critical life event occurs, which forces the family to address the matter. Oh, so we're going to wait till somebody dies, then start having a family discussion about what happens to the stuff? That's horrible, because you're in grief, you're sad, you're mourning. Everybody's in different stages. The whole family, everybody's on a different roller coaster there. depending on what's going on. By the way, if I made it clear, I just went through this. I saw it with my own eyes. I experienced it. It's awful. And now you're going to have a talk about succession? Are you kidding me? That's awful. So for you that have assets to pass, make sure you have a good succession plan in place and a transition plan. Do something ahead of when somebody passes away. Because you can have a logical discussion, think things through, get family input, make family decisions, do all those things properly so we don't have to make people deal with this when we have this tragic event that occurs. I mean, I witnessed the kids and the grandchildren and great-grandchildren running around the house saying, whoa, I want this, I want this, I want this, on the day of the funeral. No! We can do better than that. We have to do better than that. It's just inappropriate. It's because some people aren't ready for that. They're ready to grieve. They're ready to mourn. They're ready to just be for a minute. And yet these people are vultures. You're going, what? What are you thinking? If you stay away from that if you can. We don't plan because it's mental work. We don't like it. We're facing our mentality. We don't think about death. It's mental work because if you go to a lawyer and start working on a succession plan, they hit you with all these terminologies and stuff. Well, you got to avoid probate. You got to do a will. You got to do a trust. You got to do an LLC or whatever. They talk about all these legal terms, and your brain processes about so fast, and the lawyer talks about so fast. And by the time you figure out, I just screwed something up. By the time you figured out what he said with the first point, he's on to point number 3.
Yeah.
And you haven't even processed number 2 and 3 yet, and he's all ready to start number 4. The point is, you find a lawyer that processes stuff with you at the same speed you can think it through with your head. Or if you don't like that, if they're going too fast for you, go find a new lawyer. They're available. They are. Find somebody that explains stuff to you. All right. And the last point is, if I put a plan together, I'm afraid that if I do something now, in 5 years, something will change. Somebody will get a divorce, somebody dies out of order, something happens, and my plan will be wrong. Guess what? If you live for another 5 years after putting a plan together, there will be something wrong. Absolutely guarantee it. The point is this: you can change a plan cheaper than not having a plan at all. So put a plan together in case of that catastrophic event, right? And then if you need to change it, you're talking about a few $100 or $1,000 or $2,000 versus not having a plan, which could be catastrophic for your family, hundreds of thousands, or maybe the family doesn't even talk anymore. 3 parts of a career end of the career plan. Gotta be careful of my time. I want to get you out of here on time. End-of-life documents are things like power of attorney for healthcare, power of attorney for personal accounting, healthcare directives. Power of attorney for healthcare just says if I'm incapacitated and sitting in the hospital, who's going to work with the hospital staff or the doctors to figure out what my care should be? That's the power of attorney for healthcare. Power of attorney for the power of attorney for personal matters is a durable power of attorney that person could pay your bills and do your management of your businesses if you're incapacitated in a hospital and can't answer for yourself. Right? Could be the same person, could be somebody different. The healthcare directive is just what I have in place with my doctor in my local hospital to tell them how I want to be treated. That usually changes from younger to older. When you're younger, hey, keep me alive. If something may come up, I may make it. And when you're older, my mom said, if I have to go on dialysis, no. Just let me go. Let the kidneys fail. So my mom was gone in 3 days because we followed her healthcare directive. Okay? That's whatever. The second part of it is a estate plan. Just like the structures you use to make your stuff go from you to the next person when you're gone. Will, trust, LLC, whatever you use. That's pretty straightforward. You just deal with that with the lawyer and you have it done. The third part of it is business succession planning. This is the part, I think, as Nebraskans, that we're doing a terrible job of handling. If we're lucky enough to have somebody come back to our operation and take over for us, let's be sure that they can succeed. Let's make sure they make it. I think that some of us were put in a terrible position in the 70s when we started farming. All right, with me? 70s when we started farming because we borrowed too much money because we were told it was okay to borrow more money because everything was appreciating. And then when the deck of cards fell, the house of cards fell in 1980-81, then we had all this debt, and everything was worth less. And so we got taken out of farming. We all know of neighbors that got sold out of farming in the 80s because it was the farm crisis. We got sold out. Okay. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that if I was one of 4 kids, I'm not, but if I was one of 4 kids and I was a farmer, guess what Mom and Dad made me do? When they left, when they passed away, I had to pay off my other 3 brothers and sisters and buy them out, essentially. Unless one of them wanted to be a partner. And that took some of the people out too. If we can't even think about doing the same thing nowadays, if one of 4 kids, you're going to put the on-farm kid there and you only give him 25%? Because number one, you have to have 30 or 35% equity to even get a loan for ground to buy somebody out. And number 2, research studies are very clear that if I put somebody in that position, I just put them out of business. Because they can't get that debt taken care of quick enough or well enough. So the business structure I'm talking about is how are we going to set that up so that we can fairly treat that next generation, equitably treat the next generation to give them a chance of continuing to farm. All right? By the way, I'm a big believer that the on-farm kid should get credit for their sweat equity. Unless they're being compensated way more than most kids are getting compensated nowadays. All right? So does compensation for sweat equity mean they get the equal parts of all the assets when it's divided? I would submit not. I would say the fair is not equal when it goes to farm transition and succession. The kid on the farm should get credit for his sweat equity. Does that make sense? All right. Oh, I gave this talk out in Western Kansas a couple of years ago, I guess probably 19, right before the pandemic. And I had a financial advisor come up to me, and I gave this talk again in the Panhandle, and a lawyer came up to me from Scottsbluff and said, we think that the on-farm kid should get 1% for every year they have sweat equity out there, 1% of the operation. So if they're out there for 20 years, before Mom and Dad pass, they get 20% right off the top, and the other 80% still divided 4 ways. So they actually get 40%. But 1% is absolutely not any law, rule, or that's just kind of a beginning rule of thumb. You have to negotiate that and figure out what that needs to be, or what that should be. I'm just giving you something to think about. I'm not saying it has to be that way. Because I run into more parents that go, by God, I got 4 kids, the only fair way to do it is to give them each 25%. Done. We won't even consider anything else. I'm just saying if we want this farm to succeed, and we do that, we just put the farmer out of business. So consider that carefully. That's the business succession part. So to summarize, I should have a plan. Woo, yay, good. Everybody figures that out. That's not hard. I need to go to a meeting or meet with a lawyer. Just 15 minutes doesn't even count. I'm just giving you a primer on succession here. So you go meet with a lawyer. Wow, it's complicated. It's giving me a headache. And so you take no action at this time. And guess what? No action will go from 3 months to 3 years to 3 decades if you're not careful. How do I know about the circle of inaction? This is Al's circle of inaction, by the way. Because it happened to me too. It's me. I was starting to give these succession talks in Columbus while I was still there, and I realized I needed to update my will. I had the old will that said, honey, I love you. Remember I talked about that this morning? And the third part of that will said, and here's who they're going to be the guardianship, who's have guardianship of our kids if we're both gone. Okay, that was the third part of that. You need to update that will now. You can't use the old honey, I love you will when you're passing assets on to the next generation, especially if we're going to go to somebody that's going to farm. You have to do better than that. So think that through very carefully and come up with a plan. And involve the family, have that discussion. Get out of this circle of inaction. Go to something that makes sense. Go to the proper steps. I should have a plan. I go to a meeting or meet with a lawyer. Family meets to explore options. There's that family meeting thing I talked about to get input. Options are picked. You're with a lawyer typically or other financial people. Succession plan developed, signed, congratulations. And then the last step, review periodically or changes, your situation changes. Really important step. So if something changes, make sure you change your plan. How to get through these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, how long should that take? 3 to 6 months. If you did it right, most of you could have a plan by Christmas. Celebrate that you have a plan by Christmas. So please update your succession plan, and please go through it sequentially so that you get it done. Don't sit there in a circle of inaction. The lesson is have a plan, because no plan leads to chaos. Or, if you have a plan, make sure your kids know about it. No communication leads to chaos too. Because with chaos, somebody's going to get greedy. Guaranteed. And with greed, guess what? Powerful negative emotion where I didn't think I was being treated fairly, even though my sense of fairness and your sense of fairness is something different, like what Jim said. He's right. The bottom line is, don't let that happen, because greed splits families. You follow me on this? So a year ago, right now, it's Husker Harvest Days time, next 2 weeks is Husker Harvest Days. Guy calls me up in my office, and I answer some succession questions for him. He said, Allan, you got to hear the rest of my story. I said, what's that? He goes, my sister is taking me to court. I said, what? What's going on? He said, well, there's just me and my sister, and my mom and dad had figured out, not through me, but they figured out that fair wasn't equal, and equal wasn't fair. So they gave me, because I was a farmer, they gave me what I needed to make sure the farming succeeded. It wasn't equal. It wasn't the same. So my sister, my mom passed away, my dad passed away just recently, and when my sister found out about this, she didn't think that was fair. And she's claimed that the brother had undue influence on the parents, and so she's taking it all to court and fighting the will. Because of greed. Question is simply this. Who wins when that happens? The lawyers. Good job. Good job. Nice crowd. Good for you. The lawyers win. And who doesn't ever have Christmas or Easter or family events together again? That brother and that sister. Is it worth that or not? That's the question. Always the question. All right, one other thing we're doing is returning to the farm workshop. I have a few brochures on the back table. Some of you grabbed them already. The returning to farm workshop set up for anybody that's lucky enough to have somebody come into the operation with them. They can bring, I want multiple generations there. I want grandpa and grandma, mom and dad, grandson, granddaughter, whoever, grandson, daughter-in-law. I want them all there, or how many generations are involved. I want them there. And we're doing this out at York at Holtis Convention Center, December 9, 10 in person, and there'll be follow-up meetings in January, February online, virtual follow-up meetings in the evening. And we're trying to get some information to people about how to set up a plan to do all these things I talk about to make sure that on-farm kid has that third circle. What if on-farm kid has a chance to business succeed? So if you're lucky to have just someone enough to have your operation and you want to have them have some more in-depth information, consider having them return to the farm. Or if it doesn't apply for you, you can leave the brochure at the back table or take it with you and give it to a neighbor where it does apply. All right? Okay. Jim wants to talk now, so I better be quiet. Jim's going to finish this up.
Okay. So everyone made it today, right? Started at 10:30 and it's almost 2 and it went that fast. With our programs that we do different programs in person each and every year. This upcoming fall and winter, when we get them scheduled, we'll be doing a similar program. We'll be talking more on carbon credits of all things. If you like updates on the type of things we talk about, we do a 1-hour webinar online. Allan, myself, Ryan Evans, our media guy in the back room there. Everyone is welcome to join us online. You just got to sign up. If you got a computer and the internet, that's the only cost, is just signing up for it, and then you get sent the little link when the meeting goes down. In November here, we will be talking about some of the similar things that we just did. Allan's going to be talking on what we call closing out the lease. And then if you're really interested in the 2022 cash rental rates, that map that's in the back of your handout, those updates will be in there. And I'll also be talking a little bit about the ARC and PLC farm programs. If you don't know what they are, you got to log on and we'll find out about it. And if you got questions, you can actually submit them there. And if you submit them before the meeting, I'll actually make a slide for you on it. So that's your incentive to join us. Be sure to thank Eric is here. He's in the back. Make sure you thank him on your way out. This was the best food we had so far. So this is a very nice facility. We really appreciate anyone that wants to help us out. So make sure you visit with one of those two if you can, if you need anything. If you have questions, get their take on it. And the other thing, With the land survey that we're doing, I was made aware at my annual evaluation that we're trying to collect some funds to help keep the report going. When I say the report, I'm talking about the land survey on land values and cash rental rates. I said that information is free, but it does cost us a fair amount of money to send out and print all the stuff out every year. If your business or you personally are interested in this stuff, feel free to contact the NU Foundation, and they have a person there you can go online or call them and make a donation.